welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 57, where we are talking about a legacy game about using stone, wheat, clay, and pumpkins for some reason to build a city, Charterstone from Stonemaier Games. And we will get to that in just a minute, but we are going to start this episode like we always do with the news. And the news this week is brought to us by tablefor1.me. If you have not checked out this website, it's a great place to find out more about upcoming solo games and see some solo reviews, and just a great website for anybody who likes to play games by themselves. So go and check that out when you get a chance. And our first bit of news this week is that David Turczi, who designs just so many games, has announced a new game that's on Kickstarter now called The Defense of Procyon 3. And if you're thinking to yourself, that doesn't sound like a David Turczi game.
It doesn't.
It really doesn't. And when you look at the Kickstarter page, it looks even less like a David Turczi game. This is a dudes on a map style game where if you're playing multiplayer, it looks like 2 players play humans and 2 players play aliens, like kind of a team game. It's got really intensely asymmetrical powers, but also just, as I understand it, asymmetrical core mechanics depending on which side you're playing. If you're playing the humans, you're playing some kind of deck construction game. If you're playing the aliens, you're playing like a bag building game of some kind, I think. That's interesting to me. I think that's a really cool idea. And it's just a bizarre choice of design from him because that's not the kind of thing he normally does. But it just cements him in my mind as a Renaissance man.
Yeah, he tries to do it all, I guess.
He does. He's adventurous, and he's creating a solo mode for this, which is awesome. I just think that that's really cool. So if you're interested in a different sort of solo experience, check out The Defense of Procyon 3 on Kickstarter right now. It's not really getting as much attention as I think it maybe should, because there are some other big games on Kickstarter at the moment.
Oh, I can't think of any. Nothing comes to mind.
So if you aren't already backing, Ankh or Frosthaven or Cloudspire, maybe check out The Defense of Procyon 3 from David Turczi. Or you could check out The Ratcatcher. The Ratcatcher is a new design that is up on Kickstarter right now that caught my eye because it is a dungeon crawler style game about steampunk looking rat catchers who are going in to find a big rat. And it's a solo-only dungeon crawl game that comes in a smaller box that has like these cool kind of die-cut wooden meeples that are screen printed with the different Ratcatcher artwork on them. I don't know. It just looks really interesting and different to me. And there aren't that many one-player-only dungeon crawl games. And there's a high demand for dungeon crawl games, as we have found in the comments section of our episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're interested in this, it looks cool and different, I think. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of pieces, and it looks like it has potential to be a little bit fiddly. Mm-hmm. But the theme is different. The artwork is cool. Check that out. It's The Ratcatcher on Kickstarter right now. Our third bit of news for this week is a game from Van Ryder Games, and that is Final Girl. Final Girl has one of the coolest themes I've seen for a solo game.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's a cool... This is what I love about board games, is really like specific but awesome themes for a game.
Yeah, the theme of this game is you are the last girl in like a horror movie kind of setting. You've gone to what looks like a cabin by the lake with your friends. Everybody else is dead, and the monster or bad guy or whatever is still out there after you, and you have to survive. That's a great theme. This is from the people who made Hostage Negotiator, so they have a reputation of making good solo games. I mean, I've never played Hostage Negotiator, but it's essentially a modern classic for solo games. Mm-hmm. And this is, again, a one-player only game on Kickstarter right now. So if you're interested in a very different kind of experience, it looks like there are multiple Final Girls that you can play with different abilities. We saw a guy in a pig mask with like an axe or a cleaver of some kind. I mean,
right.
That's what's not to like about this. Right.
Yeah.
So check out Final Girl from Van Ryder Games. That is on Kickstarter right now. Our last bit of news this week is one that is actually several news stories in one, but I just thought this was kind of cool. Lots of unexpected solo modes this week. There are 2 of them that are official that I was really not expecting to see, but I guess companies are trying to give people something to do while they're staying at home. And so Hans im Glück has announced official solo modes for Hadara and Carcassonne, which... How's this not happened before now?
Yeah, it is kind of surprising.
Right. And you've probably got Carcassonne.
Right.
I mean, I don't.
Neither do I.
But lots of people do.
Yeah.
I just think it's a neat idea. That would be the kind of thing I would like to cover on this show at some point if I could get my hands on a copy. One of our friends definitely has it.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was neat. Gave a quick read over the rules. Seems pretty simple, straightforward. So you can get that from their website. But I thought that was interesting. Also, there's a user-created variant, but a very robust one for Warcry for Games Workshop. If you're not familiar with Warcry, because we don't really talk about Games Workshop stuff on this show, it is a skirmish-style miniatures game, like a tabletop miniatures game that's meant to be 2-player. And it's meant to be played with like maybe 8 models on the table at a time, plays in 30 minutes per game. Really cool looking game. I actually bought a copy of it because my brothers would maybe be interested in playing this with me. And I figured I could use the models for other things, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. But now I'm pretty much wanting to try this solo at some point. It's called The Lonesome Road. So if you're at all interested in that, you should definitely check that out. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for you. And the coolest one and the biggest bit of solo games news, I think, is that Come Games has announced an official solo mode for Arcadia Quest. This is basically the only thing that's kept me from getting Arcadia Quest.
Oh, really?
I've been really interested in it for a long time. I don't know. It's not because it's a smart looking game, but just because I think it would be a good beer and pretzels game for a night when you're not really wanting to do anything heavy.
Yeah, I see that.
And I like exploding dice.
Right, sure.
So if you have Arcadia Quest or you've always been interested in it, it does have an official solo mode now. It sounds like Come Games has made this a 1.0 version, but they're asking for playtesting feedback. And if it goes well, they've said that they would like to add on all the other expansions for this, which is really cool. And also maybe Starcadia Quest as well. So I just thought that was a neat addition.
Yeah.
Not at all something I was expecting. So we'll put links to all of those variants in the show notes, but if you're looking for something to do during your quarantine, this is probably a good thing to do.
Yeah.
That's all the news we've got for this week. We are going to get into the review in just a minute, but before we do, we have a shout out for our sponsors, which are Stone Valley Games, and we want to announce a giveaway from Stone Valley. So, first of all, if you've not shopped at Stone Valley Games yet, what are you doing? You don't need to be buying from Amazon right now. Buy from Stone Valley Games. They're a small company. They do a really great job providing good prices and great service and just wonderful folks to work with. They have a good and ever-growing stock of games, and they have a focus on solo games in particular. And they've been great to this show. So if you haven't checked them out, go to stonevalleygames.com and check it out. And definitely go and check them out because you're going to want to enter a giveaway for Castle Itter from DVG Games. After we did our review for Castle Itter a couple episodes ago, a lot of people have expressed interest in that. It's a really cool introductory level war game, sort of. I mean, it's like part war game, part Euro. And so if you're at all interested in that, they are going to be running that contest on their website. You can go to stonevalleygames.com/itter, which is spelled ITTER. You can enter that competition up until Thursday, the 14th of May. And then we will announce the winner on our next episode of the podcast. So if you want a chance to win Castle Itter, go to stonevalleygames.com/itter and win that. And while you're there, go ahead and pick up a game for yourself from Stone Valley. You deserve it. You've been doing a really good job. All right, let's get to the review, which this week is for Charterstone from Stonemaier Games. Charterstone was released in 2018 from designer Jamie Stegmaier and publisher Stonemaier Games. It plays 1 to 6 players and is playable 1 player because of an automa system developed by the folks at the Automa Factory. Charterstone takes place in the prosperous kingdom of Green Gully. Green Gully has been ruled for centuries by this mysterious entity known as the Forever King, who has issued a decree to his citizens to colonize the vast lands beyond Green Gully's borders. And in an effort to start a new village, the Forever King has selected 6 citizens for the task, each of whom has a unique set of skills that they use to build their charter. You are one of those citizens. In Charterstone, which is a competitive legacy worker placement game, you're going to construct buildings and populate a shared village. Building stickers are permanently added to the game board and become action spaces for any player or automa to use. And so You start off with very simple choices and few workers, but you soon have a bustling village with dozens of possible actions. Your journey through Charterstone's many secrets will last 12 games, but it doesn't have to end there. In a rare move for a legacy game, your completed village will become a one-of-a-kind worker placement game board with lots of variability at the end, so you can keep playing this if you want to. At the end of the game or at the end of the campaign, the player with the most points is the winner. This is an interesting game for us. I don't think we've ever reviewed a legacy game on this show before.
I'm trying to think. I don't think so.
We definitely reviewed games with campaign elements.
Right.
But I think this is our first legacy game. And we are thankful to the folks at Stonemaier Games who gave us a review copy of this, reached out and offered us one. And so we're going to cover this from a solo player's perspective, which is not the way this is probably usually played.
Right.
But I know some people out there have some interest in it. And, there's just a lot of mystery surrounding this for most folks, I think. I did not really know exactly what I was getting myself into when we got this.
Yeah, I didn't either. Like, obviously, I've known about it since it was announced, but I never had anything more than a vague understanding. Like, at first, it was just like, what, the box art? And I was like, wow, that looks cool.
Yeah.
But then it was like, yeah, so it's a legacy game, and you build a village or town, and I was like, okay. And that's about, I think, what I knew going into the game.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I knew that it was about building a village, but I didn't really know how much it would change over the course of the game or anything like that, or really what was inside the box. And so what the aim of this review is going to be is to give you a sense of whether this would be a good fit for you without spoiling it for you. So this is going to be a spoiler-free review. We're going to talk in very general terms about what you might expect to find in the box and as games progress, but we want to give you a sense of what the core mechanics are because those aren't really a mystery, or at least they shouldn't be.
Right.
You need to know a little bit about what you're getting yourself into. So that's how we're going to approach this. Talk to you a little bit about, the components and the rules like we always do, but kind of the basic elements of play, what the story is like without giving anything away, and what the automa system is like.
Right. And any rules that we do reveal or talk about, they will be rules you use in the first game that you play.
Right. So let's start like we always do with the components for this game.
Just what else would you expect from Stonemaier Games? Some of the most top-notch, amazing, beautiful components there are.
Yeah, they just, as a company, as a publisher, Stonemaier games feel so refined. They've gone over the production of this thing with a fine-tooth comb, and so when you look at the box, which is... we were just talking before we press record. This is one of my favorite box covers. I love games that have that just white background and like a mostly white kind of look to them with pops of strong color. I love that carries through to the inside of the box. When you open this thing up, there are 3 rule books, which we'll get into in just a little bit. And then there are just a series of boxes that are all white with just very few pops of color. The presentation when you first open this is stunning.
Yeah, it's just very clean. Whenever I opened it up, my wife was next to me. She said it reminded her of a library.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just everything organized. Little tuck boxes are kind of like little books. Yeah.
Oh, man. That's the most beautiful thing about legacy games anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the thrill of opening those little tuck boxes and looking at them there and knowing how much possibility lies in wait within them. I love that. There are a couple of core things in here that you're going to use in every game. One of them is the index. So there's a huge deck box, basically, of cards that you're going to be pulling out over the course of the game when you're instructed to add them to the game. That's kind of where the lion's share of the legacy elements of this game are kept.
Right.
And even the experience of opening that for the first time, it has this magnetic lid that you flip up to open that just feels luxurious.
Yeah.
That's where I was sold on the look and feel of this game.
Yeah, I like whenever you like pop it open, you realize it has like a little magnetic, embedded clasp that kind of snaps it in place snugly. Feels good. It
feels really good. Otherwise, the bulk of what you're going to be using in this game are nicely painted, wooden tokens and meeples, that sort of thing. Just like basic resources that are nothing fancy, but they look very nice, kind of elegant production wise. Metal coins.
Thick, chunky metal coins.
Like some of the best metal coins in any game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They only come in one denomination. They're beautiful, and it's just not what I would expect to find in an off-the-shelf retail version of a game. Really nice. So even if you don't like the game, you do get a nice set of metal coins with this. So there's that. I also really like just the way the box is organized. It just feels like everything has its place. So in between games, you can pretty easily pack it away and everything. I thought that that was really nice. Each player has their own tuck box where they keep all their components. Just really well done.
Yeah.
That brings us then to the rule book for the game, which is also that same kind of spare aesthetic that's part of the rest of the game carries over to the rule book, at least in game one. Because when you open it, there's almost nothing inside.
It was very disorienting. I didn't know if I'd missed instructions at first. Like, just because whenever you open up the rule book, it gives you a couple of instructions on the front of the book. And then you open up and there's a bunch of blank card side spaces that say like rule 1, rule 2, but there's nothing in that card shaped box. But then you'll eventually get to like, I think rule 5 or I can't remember which is the first rule that actually has text printed on it. And you have that, and then you see other gaps, and then, you know, more cards with these rules. Like the rules for each of these cards is relatively small text, but yeah, it's not a ton of rules. And so, yeah, you're just reading through trying to figure out what setup means and where you're going. I think it's over about like 4 pages.
Yeah, I think it's maybe 4 pages at the beginning. Not bad. No. Not bad at all.
And that's with a lot of white space.
Yeah, a lot of white space. And, you know, this is one of the things that's probably worth talking about here. So I appreciate that what they were trying to do here was try to provide the easiest possible entry for somebody to get started playing the game, right? Because nobody likes to take the time. That's not true. I hate taking the time to read rule books before you sit down to play. You've got to spend a lot of time to read the rule book. You've got to sit down, and then you've got to look up for your entire first game to see how they work, right? The way this game works is you get started playing your first game pretty much right away by following the instructions in the rule book and in the cards in the index box. But then your entire first game is essentially a tutorial where you are learning the rules as you go by drawing these cards from the index box that have stickers on them. And the stickers are like card sized and they fit in different spots in the rule book. And they fill out the basic rules of the game as you play your first game. That's not a bad idea in theory, right? Because it makes sense that you would get kind of a guided tour of your first game. In some ways, that idea is elegant compared to how most games are like, read this big bunch of text and then try to muddle your way through the first game. In practice, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
You're pulling out a lot of rules, and especially over the first couple of games, I would say. You're going to be filling that out, and you're having to take all of these stickers off and adhere them in there. And this is one of those things I wonder about as playing it solo versus with other people. I kind of assume, I don't know, like if you were playing this with others, that who is peeling and putting stickers on and doing all that stuff would kind of be rotated around. And maybe while one person is like fiddling with that and trying to put a sticker on, and because the rule could have already been read before you actually take the time to adhere it, someone else could be like taking their turn or like progressing in the game. But you are the only player, so everything is stopped until you get done doing this.
Well, yeah, not only is everything stopped, but like the way I had everything set up is I've got like my couple of bit bowls off to the side. I've got a board set up in front of me, but I don't have a whole nother side table where I can set the rule book flat and put the stickers on and everything. So what I'm doing is kind of awkwardly putting the rule book over the top of the board, knocking pieces over while I try to put stickers on.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
It just was clumsy. And like, I really do appreciate what they were trying to do. And I think if you were playing multiplayer, like you said, and you've got it kind of rotating around the table, it makes a lot more sense. For the solo setup, though, you sometimes have multiple books open at the same time because there's a regular rule book, an FAQ book, and an Automa book. And I like the system of having your own Automa rulebook, except that in this game, whenever you're digging out those legacy cards from the index box, you also need to check the Automa rulebook to see if you're supposed to pull out any cards that are specifically related to Automa play. And that means that at multiple points during this game, I've got 2 rulebooks spread out on the table, trying to put stickers in them. And the whole thing was a clumsy, very fiddly experience that would have been almost entirely mitigated in multiplayer.
Yeah, I think so. And also just with the way of like which out of this index you have of what cards you should be pulling out and stuff like that. They have like kind of like an index guide, and it works pretty well for like getting the cards out. It tells you the order you should do it, if it's going to the general supply, if it's going to a player, whatever. It would have been great if cards that have to deal with modifying how the Automa works were within that index, and it didn't depend on me like every card I pull being like, oh, does this one trigger something? And like having to remember to do that was like a little fiddly to have to like constantly go back and forth, check, realize I'd forgotten and I hadn't checked with other cards. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I found it to be frustrating. It's overall, I don't think it's a bad idea, right? I just think that specifically for solo play, like you said, if they could have kept all the solo stuff on the index, it would have made a world of difference. And also just the fact that because you don't have a helper there, the pace of the game changes dramatically because it becomes a very start and stop experience for that entire first game in a way that it just wouldn't otherwise.
Right.
So overall, though, the rules are pretty simple for this game. I mean, especially for your first game, there's not that much to take in. So that's nice. Like the fact that when you do finally get a chance to get those stickers in there and read it, there's not a lot going on. But the downside to doing the rulebook this way is you lose kind of the cohesion that comes with a final published rulebook where it's easy to reference things later. You lose examples of play, right? Because there's really not any of that because you're just getting blocks of text that tell you the rules for this specific thing. I did find it difficult to keep everything in my head, I guess, which is a little weird.
Yeah, I will say whenever the rules come out, and like you can see this very easily, like they're kind of category of rule or something like that. It's not just completely random and arbitrary placement. Like it is each rule, is about a topic. But I still kind of struggled to know where to look up some questions I had whenever I wasn't sure how something worked. I wasn't sure, like for instance, if how the automa worked. I wasn't sure if I should be looking in the automa rules for how something is resolved, or if that's something that you can still just use the standard rules in this address. And if I couldn't find that, if I would have to look through the FAQ to see if I could find if it was addressed in that way. I would have to spend, I think, some extra time hunting around for stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. I ran into a couple of those issues. But, apart from how the rules are rolled out and laid out, like the rule set itself is relatively simple.
Yes.
And that is because the play of this game is incredibly simple. At least to start, your first game is one of the simplest gaming experiences I've had.
Can you think of a different worker placement game that is, I guess, simpler than this or the same level of simplicity?
Same level of simplicity as this. I thought about this a little bit. I guess we should say this is at its core a worker placement game. Gather resources and build buildings and like all the stuff you would expect from a Euro. But it is like baby's first worker placement game at the beginning. I was thinking of other introductory level games like that, and the only ones I could think of are like Lords of Waterdeep is the one that for me sticks out as kind of the introductory level worker placement game.
Yeah, I think I've introduced a lot of people who are not traditionally board gamers to that game.
Yeah. And I mean, for a lot of people, it would be Stone Age or something like that, but I've never played Stone Age.
Right. Is that still in print anymore?
Yeah, it just got a new edition.
Oh, okay.
But I think that compared to Lords of Waterdeep, this is just much, much simpler even than that.
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's not really what I was expecting either.
Right.
I knew that it had a worker placement element to it, but I guess I just thought that it would be a little more complex than it was. So essentially the way this game will work is you have two workers. One of them is bigger than the other one. There's like a big one and a small one, but there's no mechanical difference between them.
Right.
You're going to place a worker out on the board. Most of the time you'll collect some kind of resource, a pumpkin or money or gold or whatever. Or you'll use the resources that you have to convert them into other goods or to build a building. And that's pretty much it. You can sell the resources you've got to this kind of market at the top of the board. You can build buildings.
Claim like objectives and buy cards from a marketplace. I can't remember. Did you say that already?
Yeah, you can draft like these cards from a marketplace as kind of a sideboard. I mean, it's all like real basic stuff that you would expect in a Euro, basically. If you imagine in your head a generic worker placement game, that's what this starts out as, for sure. The only elements of this that for me make it a little bit distinctive as a worker placement game are that it does include worker bumping, which is a mechanic that's not new to this game, but it's not in very many games yet, I feel like. Which basically means that when you or another player or an automa want to take an action in a space that already has a worker, you bump out the worker that's there and return it to its owner's pool. And that's important because if you ever get to your turn and you don't have workers to place, you have to use your turn to pick up all of your workers and put them back in your pool, which is not great.
No.
Right. You want to reduce that. So like the core tension of worker bumping is like, I want to put my workers in places that other people want to use so that I can have a more efficient game experience. I actually like that mechanic quite a bit. The only thing is it tends to work better in games with higher player counts. When the board's a little more crowded, worker bumping matters more. And I would also say that it matters more in a game with intelligent opponents. It's pure luck if you get your worker bumped and happen to have it come back to you, which is a bit of a bummer. Just the way the Automa system is designed, you have no sense of where they're going next or anything like that. So you can't really utilize that mechanic to its fullest here.
Right, yeah, there's no anticipatory action other than just, well, if I have my workers out, I have a higher chance of getting hit randomly. There's nothing else to take it other than that.
Right. That's not a bad thing necessarily to say that's the only thing that feels a little different about this game is the worker bumping. The other thing mechanically that's different is the Charterstone space, which is the space right in the middle of the board. The way this game works is when you build buildings, the buildings come on these sticker cards similar to the rules. And when you build a building, you're actually going to stick it onto the board and it becomes kind of a permanent spot on the board, which is really neat. What's interesting about that is in most legacy games that I've played, which are not many, but when you put a sticker down, you're kind of done with the piece of paper that it came on, right? In this game, you take that card that had the building on it, you hang on to the stickerless card now because there's a little picture of a crate in the top corner. I mean, for most buildings, there's a picture of a crate. And if you visit the Charterstone space in the middle of the board a little bit later, and you can basically get rid of that card to get more things out of the legacy box, the index box. I mean, that's kind of the core difference for this game from any other worker placement game I've played. And it's interesting. I like the idea of hanging on to those cards and cashing them in for something later. One issue that I did have with that, though, is that it's really expensive.
Yeah, I would say the kind of big, juicy actions in this game are expensive actions to take. You feel constrained by your resources, whether they're not the actual little resources or it's money, and you just see some of the costs on those and you're like, oh gosh, that's going to take me several turns to get to.
Yeah, it's an interesting choice. To me, it makes the pace of the game feel a little too slow for my taste because I feel like I've got to spend 3 or 4 turns building up, and then I'm going to blow everything that I've built up on a building, and then I've got to build up a little more, then I can blow it all on a Charterstone thing. And it could just be that I'm a bad player, right? But it is hard in this game to get that sense of any kind of an engine going throughout the course of one individual game.
Right.
You can get one going over the course of the campaign, I think. But within a single game, I found it hard to focus my efforts in a way that made that pacing feel like, okay, I've done this. Now I can more easily turn in this Charterstone that's going to lead to 3 or 4 other things. But even that said, with the pacing not being quite what I would want, I think that idea of the Charterstone space is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's an appealing space. I mean, one, it's always going to be good things you get from it. And you don't know what it's going to be. And I think there's something exciting about that. It's like, all right, I'm going to spend all these resources and crack this thing open, and I'm going to see what I get out of it.
Yeah. I don't feel like we can say too much more about the mechanics of the game than that, because that's really the lion's share of it. For your first game, you're going to be getting resources, building buildings, maybe visiting the Charterstone. In fact, I think you're supposed to visit it once during your first game, which is a good idea. I'm glad that they include that in the rules, that you really should be doing that. Otherwise, other things that you can do, you can sell to that market that we mentioned. You can try to get some reputation to get on this little reputation track, which is a big deal because there's a lot of points to be had there during the course of the game. Also, there's a little track down at the bottom of the board that keeps track of where we are in the game. And essentially, the more kind of core big actions that you take, the quicker the game progresses toward its end. If you go to the Charterstone, take that action, you're going to progress the game toward its end a little faster. If you build a building or something like that, there's a little key down at the bottom that reminds you, hey, if you do this, you're going to move the game along. It's very, very, very simple.
Yes.
That's my core issue with this game. Speaking from a mechanics standpoint, it feels too slow.
It feels too slow as in it starts too simplistically, or just the gameplay in general feels too slow to you?
So both. I think for my taste at least, I didn't feel like until game 4 that there were very many interesting choices to make during the course of a game. Game 1 is so bare bones simple that I just wanted a little bit more going on in that experience, and I felt like I didn't get it until a third of the way through my campaign. Without giving anything away, the game does get a little more complex. There are more nuances added to the gameplay, but never becomes even a medium weight game, really. I would say like light medium.
But I think I would put it at the lighter end of medium. It's not a super complex brain brainy
brain
type game. The game gets a little more meaningful or interesting choices, like you said, around 3 or 4. I also felt that was about the point that I think it was about then that I kind of started feeling my own natural rhythm of understanding the game, not like understanding the game, but just like running the automa, getting through stuff quickly. And I feel like the pace of my games personally picked up because I was a little bit more sure of myself. Because one thing, I've never played a legacy game before, but having permanent stickers and all these other like choices, it does produce some anxiety and like, oh God, I hope I'm doing this right. Am I about to do this wrong? And like wanting to double and triple check to make sure I'm going to do something or I'm not missing a rule. And I think it was about then that I got more confidence that I wasn't messing something up, that I got kind of used to the system of looking up the index and whatnot.
Yeah, I definitely felt that as well. And I think that's a good tension. You know, I think it's good to feel a little bit of anxiety over whether you're making the right choice when it's a permanent change. I mean, that's part of the thrill, right? In its own way of the legacy game. I did really enjoy the process of getting to discover something new. And that's what makes a legacy game most interesting to me is here's all those tuck boxes. Here's this whole box of cards. What kind of possibilities are in there? One thing that's nice about this design is you are constantly going into that box. And in that sense, you're constantly bringing out new material. The downside to that is you're constantly going into that box and constantly hunting for new material.
Yeah, I did spend a lot of time dealing with the box and then stuff like that. And maybe this kind of like we said, comes back to like being solo. It means a lot more of that. Literally all of it falls onto you to do all of those things. There's no shared burden between the players. And maybe some people don't think it's a burden. I mean, there's definitely peeling off stickers, going through the box, all of that stuff. There is a tactile dimension and possible satisfaction out of it. Like I like peeling the stickers off, doing all that stuff. But when you're doing it constantly and you're spending so much time doing it, the appeal does start to wane.
Well, and when you're doing it for an automa and not for yourself, like it's way more appealing to do it because of choices that you made. But the automa system, which we'll talk about in just a second, they can make these Charterstone actions much more easily than you can. And so you're going to be spending 2/3 of your time unpacking their stuff and only 1/3 of the time unpacking yours. That part's not great. And it kind of turns then that thrill of discovery that's core to the experience of a legacy game into a very fiddly experience.
Yeah, I didn't expect that. I think it was a little confusing to me also in the beginning because, I mean, do you have any sense of what the consensus is on the automa in general being fair or...
Not the general consensus, I would say, because I don't think there are that many people who've covered this from a solo perspective.
Okay. Yeah, playing it just solo, I would say it seems fair enough. And I would say is, I guess, balanced enough, but it's the early games, it doesn't. Almost just a fair warning that like it will be better.
Yeah, it does get better. The way the automa system for this game works is you've got just a deck of cards, and on the automa player's turn, you flip up the top card and you just put their worker where it says to put it. It is bare bones simple. And in that way, I love it. Like I just like simple automas more and more because automa systems can get bogged down so quickly with trying to replicate a human player's decisions. And of course, the problem there is you can't in a fully satisfying way. And the more you try to do it, for most designers, the more bogged down it gets in its own rules. This is not that. The automa rules for this are dead simple. The downside to it is, though, it introduces a lot of randomness and not in a good way. Like, because of the randomness of not knowing where the workers are going to go, you can't plan for worker bumping type stuff, right? That sort of thing becomes just pure randomness where they're going to block. Not the end of the world, right? But it just removes that element of the game from consideration for the most part. But the real kicker is that on each of these cards, it tells you how many points they're going to generate for the turn. And because of the pace of this game and the way that it works that we mentioned earlier, where you're like taking several turns to get resources together before you can do something that will earn you points, it feels like playing against automas works like you get to score points once every 4 or 5 turns, but you'll score more points than they will because you're a human and you're smart. But they're scoring points like 3 points, 2 points every turn. And that is really disheartening.
I feel like I felt a little better after maybe the first 2 games. But yeah, like especially the first game, if you see that automa start just like racing ahead and you really haven't done a lot. Like from what I can tell, that's a pretty normal feeling. And also that's what both of our experiences were. It goes up at a steady rate because from a design standpoint, that's how the Automa stays competitive, is that it's scoring some points on a kind of regular basis. And there's it like how much it scores per turn, and there are other things that can change it just in the luck of the draw for the Automas. But it will start really gaining some ground ahead of you.
Yeah, I like how simple that is. I like that it just generates points and you don't have to worry about keeping track of anything or anything like that. That's nice. But seeing it just race ahead, like my first game, I was just crushed. Absolutely crushed by the Automa. And you had a similar experience as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And if you lose, you back off the Automa's difficulty a little bit for the next game. But if you win, you bump it back up, and potentially quite a bit if you're really beating it. And that's a good idea in practice. I really like that idea. Or in theory, I really like that idea. In practice, I felt like the way it worked out for my games, and again, this could just be because I'm not very good at it, but I felt like I was almost destined to lose every other game at the very least. But even the games I did win, I felt like could go against me through no fault of my own. And I would still end up losing just because they happened to draw the right cards that would give them, they would regularly get 3 points instead of the cards that give you a little bit less on their turn. I lost like 2/3 of the games, maybe a little bit less than that, but close to it. And that didn't feel great because it didn't feel like it was always my fault.
Right. I won at least half of my games. I guess, but there was one game that I actually had a 3-way tie with both of the Automas.
Oh, really?
Which kind of blew my mind.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was just funny that not only did the Automa tie, I also tied with them.
Yeah, and I mean, the designers have the added problem here of trying to make the game progress with you as you get a little stronger and more powerful and you become more adept at playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
They have to balance the experience of playing each individual game, and they have to balance the progress toward the end campaign goals, because there's like a winner of the campaign, and you want that to feel like there's some contention. And so I really do appreciate that must have been a monumental task to try to balance this well. But I felt like the way that it ended up balancing campaign-wise made my individual games feel unfair. And that's not great when you're playing through 12 games. It's a bad feeling going into a game thinking it's almost predetermined that you're going to lose. Maybe other people didn't have that experience. Did you ever feel like going into a game, after you've won, I don't have a shot at this?
I do feel like there was kind of a swinging action to it. Almost certainly, if I lost one game, the chance that I was not just going to win the next game, but also like really win, that would increase the power of the Automa. That was the most likely thing to happen.
I had kind of the opposite experience. Like I knew I had a chance at winning on the games where I just lost. But on the games after I won a game and it was time to adjust the difficulty back up again, I felt like I was just in for getting creamed. Man, that doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. On the flip side, though, the one thing I really like about this system is Automa Factory just does a bang-up job of doing a nice streamlined system. And even to the point where, for this game, you need to run 2 Automas at the least to get a fuller experience, have more people competing for spaces on the board. Even running 2 Automas, not bad. It was easier than running 1 in a lot of games. I also really like that this game makes provisions for the fact that you need to fill up 6 different charters on the board, different like player areas, but they don't want you to have to run 5 Automas if you're playing by yourself, right? So they have these rules for how to boost inactive charters between games. You're just automatically adding buildings to the board and that sort of thing and building them out nicely. So you constantly have more and more options. That's great. I really like that. The problem with the simple Automa here, though, is that they weren't often building as much as they needed to build in order to fill out their own charters. So the inactive charters in the game were growing at a better pace than the halfway intelligent AIs in the game. They had bad luck. They weren't building the way that they should because there weren't building cards in the offering. And so I ended up in this place where, like, by the end of my campaign, I'm looking at full charters for myself and for the inactive charters, and the AI charters have the bare minimum number of buildings. So it just, that part of it was a little bit of a letdown too. Is like, I didn't feel like I was getting the full kind of play experience that you would get in a multiplayer game, which I mean, obviously you won't playing solo.
Right.
But even just in terms of the building options on the board.
Yeah, mine went a little differently, where I had one of the automa did very well as far as like doing buildings and filling things out, and the other one did much, much worse. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just, like you said, kind of with simplistic, streamlined systems, there's a lot to gain from it, but one of the disadvantages is it makes it do a little bit more like erratic behavior as far as simulating what an actual human opponent would be like.
Yeah, that left me with varying levels of satisfaction at
Right.
the end of my game. I think that should do a pretty good job of giving you a sense of how they work. You're just drawing a card, resolving it, and it's very simple kind of automa system, even though you have to run at least 2. Let's talk story for a minute.
Okay.
Without giving anything away, how is your experience with the story for this game?
I would say the story was light.
Yeah, I think light is a good way to say it. There's enough story here. They give the mechanics of the game context
Yes.
in a way that's helpful, in a way that grants a city building game a little extra theme and motivation. Because that's not the sort of thing that you would have in a non-legacy style city building game, right?
Right.
You build cities because cities need to be built.
Right.
I don't know, manifest destiny sort of
Right.
thing.
The imperialist way.
Yes. So it's nice to have a little more context than that. I really liked that. But you should just know going in, this is not a story-driven game. The only other Legacy games I've ever played are Gloomhaven and Pandemic Legacy. And Gloomhaven's story is whatever. I don't think it's great, but there are significant impacts on the world around you through your choices. Pandemic Legacy, to me, felt like a cinematic experience. Like there was a really good story there that was unfolding well. This is interesting because I feel like it's way more story light than either of those. But that means that you're not spending a lot of time reading story text. You know, you're playing the game, which is nice. And it did surprise me still.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was light in how much story is getting revealed after each like session, each game. But yeah, it wasn't to say that there were some surprises, and like, yeah, they definitely, I guess, like, I don't know if like subverted my expectations, maybe somewhat, but yeah, I don't know, it was good.
Yeah, it definitely subverted my expectations in a couple of spots. I was starting to feel a little like after the first couple of games, like, oh, there's no story to this game. And then they just kind of, I don't know, a couple of points after that, I thought, okay, you did put more effort into this part than I thought. And I like the feeling of being surprised by story in games.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like board games overall are at a severe disadvantage when it comes to storytelling compared to like video games or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just almost always easier to play a video game or read a book to get a story experience.
Right.
Unless you're talking about emergent storytelling that comes from gameplay around a table with other people, especially. But legacy games just have that special ability to do something different through the opening of tuck boxes and that kind of like tactile experience of revealing some new thing that's going to have permanent impact on the board. It lives up to that somewhat, but I don't know. If you're coming to this because you played Pandemic Legacy, you liked the experience of the cinematic nature of that and you want it again, but in a more Euro kind of setting, just don't come at it that way or you're going to be disappointed. Board state changes over the course of the game for this, but it's nothing dramatic really for most of the game. I would say it does have a couple of dramatic moments, but not like that. So without giving stuff away, it's hard to review legacy games in general, and it's hard to review games without giving stuff away or trying to avoid spoilers. But I feel like that gives you a pretty good idea of the core mechanics of the game, what to expect from the automa, what to expect from the story of this game. So maybe it's time to move into the good, the bad, and the ugly for this one.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to say on the good end right up front. Number one, production. Really well produced game. The only things about it that are frustrating for me are like the stickering and the fiddliness of that. That doesn't minimize for me what a beautiful, well thought out production this was. Even like the way the sticker cards work, the design of them, that's clever and different than what I've seen in other games.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing for sure that has to go in here for me.
Yeah, it's a good tactile experience. I don't know, just like pulling the stickers off, placing them on there, just all of that. I mean, and all of the stickers and cards they're coming off of are very high quality. There are like cards that have like scratch offs on them.
Yeah.
Things like that. Who doesn't like scratching off stuff?
Yeah, I forgot about the scratch offs. I love scratch off stuff.
And you don't even need your own coins because it comes with big chunky coins to scratch off for you.
Exactly. So from top to bottom, great production, and at a reasonable price point. So I think that's really cool. Also, very approachable game. I think if you are intimidated by games that have campaigns and you feel like you're getting into a lot, this is not overwhelming in that regard. You're going to start out very simple, and by the end of the campaign, you're going to end with a light medium game. If you're looking for something that's a little easier going as a solo experience, this is probably that. And also, I would just say that running the Automa, very easy.
Yes.
So for a solo player, if you're looking to spend more time on your turn, you still will spend a lot of time stickering things for the Automas for sure, but not trying to suss out where they would place their workers or like where they're going to build. That sort of thing is really easy. Also, I think the main takeaway for me for the good column for this game is there's so much stuff to unlock. And that's what you want in a legacy experience, right? You want a treasure trove of things to bring out and explore during the course of the game. This game does have that. That index box with the cards that you're going to reveal is packed. I mean, there's so many cards in that box. And by the end of it, you've unpacked almost all of it.
Yeah, you go through a ton of it. There's a lot to unpack. And I mean, I would say there's also some just like novel surprises throughout the experience, which are just, I don't know, they're fun, they're good. I mean, it is an experience.
Yes, and it does have branching paths with like some meaningful choices that you're making during the course of the game that will unlock some things and not unlock others. I think that's cool. So there is a reason to play through this again if you really wanted to. Like you can buy a recharge pack for this game and do it all over again. I think that's neat because the backside of the board is just another map, right?
Right.
So that's really nice that they built that right in. The other thing I would say is, you know, Rahdo and some other people have made the case for games like Pandemic Legacy being playable after the last game. I mean, you technically can do that, but you're not going to. Those are disposable experiences. Same with Gloomhaven, right? The people who buy the removable sticker set for Gloomhaven so they can peel everything off and play it again. I mean, both of you who will actually do that, I hope you really enjoy it. Most people won't do that. They're disposable experiences. This is different because he has created a legacy game that is fully playable when it's done. In fact, I would say I enjoy the experience of playing the completed game more than I expected I would. I guess I would say that I could imagine myself playing this completed version of the game, pulling it out if I wanted just a medium Euro game experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I will say, I feel like I would be more motivated to do that if I had gone through this experience with other players.
Right.
Because, you know, I had the board and it's cool and it was like mine and, you know, I've become very familiar with it as it's evolved over the course of, you know, all of these sessions. I think it would be more fun to do as like, hey, remember when we played and like went through this whole experience together? Let's play this worker placement game again.
Right. Yeah. That brings me actually to my first bad thing that I would say about this game is I was regularly aware of the fact that this game would be better with other people. And some of that is just like the shared experience of unlocking things, right? Like you mentioned. I named my city and all like the little charters and everything in this game. You actually have to write on the board what you want to call it. I named them after places in Dungeon Degenerates.
Yeah.
Just because I liked the juxtaposition of that dark, grimy world with all of this stuff. And I chuckled to myself about it, but nobody else cares.
Yeah, it's one of those things that would be more fun. And you also have the chance to name not just places, but like if there's like other characters or whatever type thing, you know, like you can name those things. And that's just something that I'm not going to keep doing that really, because it's just not as satisfying. It's more fun to come up with those things, see what other people come up with for like naming things. So I feel like a lot of that stuff, which I do think would be genuinely good in a multiplayer setting, was very much lost in my solo experience.
Yeah, I think so too. And part of that for me, and will be another bad thing for me on this list, is the Automa difficulty and like point generation method forces you into styles of play that you would not play if you were playing a multiplayer game. It forced me to be more aggressive and just focus so much on like how to churn out points quickly without trying to develop some kind of long game plan, that I felt like I was playing very differently this game than I would if I was playing with others at the table. And that's not going to be a big deal for everybody, but for me, I felt way more rushed than I think I would have otherwise.
Yeah, I definitely get that. There was more of a rush feeling because the Automa is always marching forward. There's very much that sense of like, okay, I got to make sure I'm still doing things at a certain pace or I'm going to fall behind in ways that I can't catch back up. But I don't know if it bothered me as much. It just wasn't. I don't know if I would necessarily put that in the bad for me personally, but I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it might even just be psychological more than anything.
Right.
Right. It might be that mechanically you're not actually that far behind, but when you see the automa constantly marching forward, it's disheartening in a way that makes me feel like, oh, I've got to do something now.
Right.
In a way I just didn't particularly like in this game. So that would go in the bad category for me. But I guess the biggest thing for me would just be how fiddly it is. That would be my main complaint about this game. Is I felt like I spent a lot of time unstickering things and putting them on the board or putting them in the rule book or looking to see how the Automa rules changed this particular sticker. And I don't like fiddling with that kind of stuff when I'm playing a game. I just want to play a game. I want the thrill of unpacking boxes without the constant need to be stickering something.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's lots of stickering, hunting through for like a bunch of cards out of the index, just doing all of that. And then also, I would say, I left this game set up mostly whenever I played it, but putting things up and getting it out, there's a fair amount of pieces to have to like deal with. That's just another level of things that you have to deal with during, especially if this isn't a game that you can leave set up. It's a good bit of stuff to kind of put back away. It's great that it has tuck boxes for players and stuff. It's just more stuff.
Yeah. I think overall, I don't have anything ugly to say about this.
Right.
Overall, it left me feeling like, when is the digital version of this coming out again? Because there's an app for this that was just released.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm of two minds about this because I don't really like board game apps, period. Mm-hmm. I'd rather just play a video game most of the time. And B, I also just think the tactile thing that we talked about is such a big part of legacy games. Opening those tuck boxes and everything is such a big part that I wouldn't want to lose that. But the app looks really polished. And I think it would probably mitigate a lot of the issues that I have with pacing of the game and like taking the time to put stickers on and like even the Automa system. Just have it being managed by a video game AI instead of having to flip cards. I feel like for me and my taste, I think I would enjoy the digital version of this more. Or else, the way I would enjoy it most is just with other people.
And I think I also don't have anything ugly to say, but I guess I would just finish with, going into talking about the Stomp and that this is not going to get it from either of us.
No.
Nothing about this was a bad or negative experience. But there were like constant little reminders I had of this would be more fun with other real human beings.
Yeah, I agree. And that has never been the case with a Stonemaier game for me. I would not say that I had unreasonable expectations for this game or anything like that. I think I went into it pretty measured. I had heard some kind of mediocre reviews before, but I just like to make up my own mind. And I do think that those reviews help me to set my expectations properly. When a Stonemaier game comes out, hype is just through the roof. And for a good reason. They're excellent. Like Jamie Stegmaier is the Renaissance man. Lots of people like to talk about Ryan Laukat being kind of the Renaissance man of board gaming. And that's true. But I do feel like Jamie sometimes gets overlooked in that. He's running an amazing publisher. And he's designed Viticulture. Also, he found Elizabeth Hargrave, who gave Wingspan. He just does so many things so well. And usually I play his games and I feel like they meet my high expectations. In this particular case, I just feel like there are just a number of things here that didn't work for me and left me feeling a little disappointed in the experience overall. But that's not to say it's a bad game.
So, what kind of solo player do you think would like this?
I think a solo player who has space to keep this game out throughout the duration of the campaign. A solo player who does not mind taking the time to kind of meticulously put stickers on the board and that sort of thing. Like, who enjoys the process of the tactile part of this game so much that they would actually really love that kind of stickering and placing new buildings out and doesn't mind their game being interrupted.
Right.
I think that person who also just wants something kind of light.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the person that this is for. Does that seem right to you?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say definitely if you like those tactile things, because I like that probably not as much as some people, but it's an enjoyable thing to do. And I know a lot of people get enjoyment out of it, but Yeah, it was never super mentally taxing, and that's like in a good way. And so I could see this as a really good kind of end of day wind down, knock out a session. Sessions aren't bad, especially if you're not having to set up and break down. They really have a nice clip to them.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. They definitely, you can wrap up a game in just under an hour, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
That's a good length for a game. So overall, it's not going to get a recommendation for us, but I do think that there are people out there who would like this. And if you've got a group that you can play with, it's a cool experience, you know. And if you're looking for kind of a light medium worker placement game that has some of that legacy stuff, there's nothing else out there quite like Charterstone. And that's all we've got for this episode, folks. Don't forget, we are running a giveaway with Stone Valley Games for a copy of Castle Itter, so go and check that out at stonevalleygames.com/itter. Also, if you want to check out other shows like ours, you can go to dicetower.com and check out the whole network of shows that we're part of, the Dice Tower Network. So you can find another board game podcast or 10 that suit your podcast listening needs there. If you haven't followed us on Facebook or Instagram, you totally should. We post on there from time to time about different games that we're playing and that sort of thing. Keep up with us about contests and other promotions that we're running. Go and check that out on Facebook or Instagram. Our Instagram handle is @Solosaurus Podcast. And finally, if you have not rated or reviewed this show on iTunes, we haven't mentioned that in a while. It helps. It helps a lot. If you'll take just a couple of minutes to go over there and give us a quick review, it'll help make the show more visible for other folks, and it would really mean a lot to both of us. Until next time, though, my name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.